Hi, I'm Rob Vanstone, and welcome to the 67th edition of the Rider Rumblings video podcast. I'm already not talking into the microphone. This is a solid start to this production. Each week we pick a rider uniform number from today or yesteryear that corresponds with the number of the podcast. So today, number 67, an obvious choice from today's Rough Riders, Dan Clark. And growing up, number 67 was always Clyde Brock. In 1967, the Riders lost 24-1 to Hamilton in the Grey Cup. So enough 67 chatter for now. Murray McCormick, our esteemed beat writer, is with us today. And as well from the Piffles podcast, Greg McCullough. And Greg's making his second appearance on this podcast, showing remarkable versatility. So, Greg, thank you so much for being with us. You're wearing the Jesus Sprinkles t-shirt that the Piffles podcast was able to launch not so long ago. So that's product placement at its finest, I see.
Oh yeah, you gotta push your stuff when you can, I guess. But good news is, episode 77, you can use Dan Clark as well.
That's right.
Go. Plan ahead.
That was a touchdown catch number too.
Yes, it was.
So hopefully we make it through 10 more. Hopefully we make it through this one. So how's the t-shirt going?
Going really blows my mind every time.
Yeah.
Every morning when we check the emails, it blows me away. We crossed the $3,000 donation mark the other day. So, and t-shirt's still going out, and it looks like we're probably gonna have to do another batch because people still love it. So.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, but only because I've outgrown all my t-shirts. So
that sounds like more than a sprinkles of money. That's a pretty good
it's
wad of cash.
It's at least a cupful anyway. But it's amazing how I can't say enough good things about the hearts of the Saskatchewan people when it comes to stuff like this. They've latched on to this. Obviously, Riders playing well definitely helped with the sales, and Cody becoming popular. I remember last time I was here when I said, who's the face of this franchise? And you said Cody Fajardo because he's the starter. And that was, 1-2 games into his tenure. And I kind of questioned you on that, but he's definitely taken on that role, and the fans have embraced him because of it.
And the proceeds go to what? The Hospitals of Regina Foundation?
Hospitals of Regina Foundation. Cody picked that charity. We had a short list, and that was one he chose. So, I can't wait to give him a giant novelty check if they let us do that.
I remember when he explained why he picked that foundation, and he mentioned that he couldn't imagine being a parent and going through what the parents go through when their kids in the hospital. That's why he really leaned towards that. It was kind of, wow, that's a mature thought from a 27-year-old guy to bring that up, to realize that the tough times that people go through in hospitals with their children especially, and that was good of Cody to recognize that.
All my dealings with Cody have been amazing, and I've said this before on our podcast, and Rod Peterson, when he had me on, he's got a fan for life, just because he's such a great and genuine person that I could care less how he plays on the field at this point. He's such a great guy. Yeah,
it really is amazing when you deal with him, and there's no pretense about it. There's no phoniness. It's all genuine, and you combine that with the way he's played by and large this season, and it's been quite the phenomenon. And it's, I would argue, and I don't really think there's a compelling case against it, he has saved their season.
Oh, most definitely. The way he's played, he's definitely been a silver lining. Very few people going into the season, they were nervous with who we had as quarterback, with Zach Claros, obviously, with his injury history, and Fajardo was a question mark, and you had everyone calling for Harker after the preseason game, and he's a 23-year-old rookie. But yeah, the way Fajardo's turned it on is they have a legit starting quarterback right now, and no one knew that going into this season.
My only concern, Murray, you can address this better than I, because you unfortunately had to witness the Banjo Bowl in person. You didn't have the option of changing to tennis or the test pattern.
I was there, but thank God we have a beer sponsor.
Oh my goodness!
The cool part was just to touch upon tennis at halftime. Everybody from the press box, and there weren't a lot of us, all moved into front of one of the TVs inside one of the building. Moves TVs inside the building to watch tennis. We all thought we're going to see her win this match, which would be so cool, and go back and watch the Riders implode. And then Serena Williams played like Serena Williams, and so I looked up and I saw her win the match. It was pretty spectacular. Who'd have thought, I know it's not Riders, but who thought the Raptors, and we'd have a Raptors championship and a U.S. Open championship in the same year.
And in both cases, they've trumped the beloved Saskatchewan-Roughriders. Yeah. Night one of the regular season, I'm at Mosaic Stadium waiting for people to show up to watch the Riders on the big screen. Eventually the the Raptors and Golden State start playing, and that's when it gets interesting. But for the actual Rider game, there weren't even 1,000 people at Mosaic Stadium to watch Zach Collaros get injured on the third play and seemingly the season go down with him. So that's twice this year that the Rough Riders have been usurped. This is a really unfortunate choice of words, but trumped by another sport in North America.
Maybe that's why they just wanted to get out of there, because they sure didn't play like they played like they wanted to be watching tennis.
What was that? What happened to that football team?
I think we forgot the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are a damn good football team, and I think that's a great defense. And if you think about it, in the 2 games the Riders split, the Bombers dominated all but 3 minutes and 18 seconds of it. You could stretch, especially on Saturday, but even the Labor Day Classic, the Bombers' defense came up pretty big, other than the 3 minutes and 18 seconds, which were the difference. So I think the Riders were fortunate to get a split out of this. I think the way Winnipeg played is more of an example of what Winnipeg is in that Banjo Bowl. And I'm not saying it's an anomaly that that's the Riders came up there, but I don't know how you fix that. That's maybe you just say, as Roy Shivers once said, you always get your butt handed to you once a season, and maybe that's when the Riders got their butt handed to them. Mind you, it's twice now because Calgary did it earlier in the year too.
Greg?
And that's the thing about this team, though. They kind of do this Jekyll and Hyde thing where you think they're going to be world beaters, and then they'll show up the next game and they'll absolutely get their butts handed to them. And Murray's right. Winnipeg is a really good team, really good defense. And I said before the Labor Day Banjo Bowl split happened, I'm going to be happy if we come out a split, even though the Riders were on a winning streak. But Winnipeg's defense is that good. Their offense had a lot of question marks, but their offense actually looked really decent against against us last week.
How do you knock what Chris Streveler did? He ran the ball effectively. His passes were as good, if not better. That dart he threw to Augustine, he threw some really nice passes. That 21-yard run he had is as much an example of how bad the Riders' tackling was, how hard he is to bring down. We all remember that one where he just blew through people. And that, for all intents and purposes, that quarterback draw in the second offensive series of the game ended it.
Why? Yeah. How is it possible that, okay, it's 2nd and 17, and you at that point, the Bombers are on their 3-yard line. You've just gotten a sack by Solomon Alamimian. You know that there's probably only one play in the Bomber playbook in that situation, and that's the quarterback run. Mm-hmm. So what do the Rough Riders do? There's no linebackers in the same postal code as Chris Streveler. Strategically, what on earth were they doing or thinking in that situation?
I'm going to
that out there.
So can I once again give credit to I watched that play again a couple times last night, a few times, and what great blocking by Winnipeg. They just sealed off that corner. They sealed off the center of the line and in went Streveler. If you watch, there's nobody even touching him until he gets to the end of that run. So it's bad enough the Riders, there's no linebackers there, but
schematically that was an absolute mess.
An absolute mess, but schematically it was an absolute perfectly drawn up offensive play by the Blue Bombers. And sometimes I know, Rob, sometimes it happens.
But if you're Jason Shivers, how do you look at that and say, we're not going to have a single linebacker anywhere near there? You've got Cameron Judge blitzing. You've got Derek Moncrief back in pass coverage. You've got Solomon Alamimian flanking out to his right to cover a receiver who looked to be on the telecast, Johnny Augustine, lined up in the slot. Yeah. If you're Jason Shivers, how do you call that defense when Matt Dunnigan said during the telecast, I could have called that up here.
I saw Matt.
How do you schematically do that? That's awful coaching.
Yes, it is. So what do you do about it? I guess, do they just give up? Or what do they do, Rob?
Well, look, on that drive, they just kept going and going. How do you make that call in that situation?
But at the same time, we got to remember, Shivers technically is a young coordinator, so mistakes are going to happen. But the guys on the field, that's where I was pulling my hair what little I have left. And that's why I'm wearing a hat. But I haven't seen tackling that bad since that Calgary game. Which, if you look at both games, they look exactly similar.
Yeah,
because Streveler breaking tackles, Augustine breaking tackles, receiver breaking tackles. That was just a poor game all around on all 3 phases. And they got to pick it up and get ready, because if they're worried about running quarterback with Streveler, Adams is going to come in here and take our lunch.
I don't know. Adams isn't a Streveler type running quarterback. He's more of a smaller size. Streveler is big. You stand beside him, he's thick, he's strong, he's got... Really, he's a little different. I think Adams poses a little more challenges into that. But I think another thing, too, is their lack of composure. Gainey losing it for strange reasons. Nick
I don't
Marshall,
blame him.
Yeah, I didn't.
Mike O'Shea with that call.
That was
cheap.
Yeah, that was. But it was earlier in the game too that I saw that passage. I mean, Nick Marshall takes dumb penalties on a regular basis now, and I don't quite understand what's going on in his mind. And composure is a big part. Mike Edom was a lot of times he was the voice of reason out there, and he's as fiery as any guy. And that's kind of weird that he'd be the guy trying to calm things down on the bench and stuff. But it was maybe they say Roy Shivers, you get your butt handed to you and you move on. And I know you're going to look at me. They're still 7-4. And I think if anybody had said when Zach Claris went down after the Labor Day Classic or the Banjo Bowl and Labor Day Classic, they could be 7-4, they'd say, well, you're nuts. There's no way this team's being 7-4. 4-7 might have been a more realistic look at the team. So problem is, this brings in that fourth place into because I think a lot of things could happen. I think Winnipeg's going to finish first. Any argument there?
Yeah, I think Calgary.
Calgary's going to, but Winnipeg and Calgary would take first and second, maybe say?
I think it's going to be a horse race for, no pun intended, for Calgary to catch up to Winnipeg, but it's definitely plausible. I could definitely see them being 1 and 2.
Yeah, and then so the Riders now are fighting whatever.
If you're going to finish third, you might as well finish fourth.
Yeah, well, especially the way the Eskimos are going now too, and whatever happens with Trevor Harris. So they've brought in that third and that crossover playoff because the 4 teams in the West are going to make the playoffs.
Oh, easily.
And unless I don't think the Lions can they, Rob? You looked. I think it's possible.
1 in 10, yeah.
1 in 10, it's not possible. So that home playoff game is kind of looking pretty slim right now.
Well, I wouldn't say slim. They've got Winnipeg here on October 5th.
Yeah, that game, and then they have they play Edmonton twice at the end of the season, and that game, that November 2nd game here, is probably going to be pretty significant now. At least they're going to be going to the playoffs. So they kind of put themselves. They could have gained so much from a win, and they lost so much from the loss that it's just they got to get, as they say, back on the horse, drawing board, all that kind of stuff. And
what concerns me is that if you look back on it, and I wrote about this in my column today, I guess yesterday. It's in today's paper, today being Tuesday. It was trending this way. You look at the game in Montreal, albeit a truncated game, and the only 2 touchdowns the Riders scored were on fumble returns. Okay, Ottawa comes here, and the Riders put up 4 offensive touchdowns, but there were also times during that second quarter when you thought they're just determined to let Ottawa back into this game. It was a flawed performance against Ottawa. They were very fortunate to be playing Ottawa that day. Then you look at the Winnipeg game here, the Riders score 1 offensive touchdown. On Saturday, the Riders score 1 offensive touchdown at a juncture in the game when it just doesn't matter anymore. So if you look at the Riders' past 4 games, aside from that Ottawa game, they've scored 2 offensive touchdowns in 3 games. And missed tackles had been an issue leading into this game. Lack of discipline had been an issue leading into this game. So if you look at the way it was trending, and they'd allowed 5 sacks against Winnipeg the week before, they allow 5 sacks again. If you look at the way this is trending, and you don't just look at the Banjo Bowl and say, okay, you're bound to get your butts handed to you at some point. But if you see the way it was kind of, things were leading up to that game, I'm not sure this is just a Banjo Bowl issue. I think this is a last month issue. Am I right or wrong?
Well, as I said a little earlier, they're playing Winnipeg for 2 of those games. In Winnipeg, I think you're not giving enough credit for how good they are. Willie Jefferson is probably the most outstanding defensive player this year right now, in my mind. Even better than Charleston Hughes. And Charleston Hughes got another sack. Their defense is that good. And I think you're not giving enough credit to Winnipeg.
Well, are they legit or are they not legit? If you just write them off as soon as they play a good team, does that mean that you put the Rough Riders in another tier and that they shouldn't even be mentioned in the conversation? They went into that game, give credit to Winnipeg, but they went into that game with an opportunity to be in first place if they won it. So you're talking about the Rough Riders and Bombers, at least theoretically, as being comparable teams. Now it seems like, okay, give all the credit to Winnipeg, and they're a good team, so their defense is going to play well. But at some point, you've got to lacerate that defense if you're legit. And I think
they've shown they can do it.
This game calls into question what do you make of the Rough Riders at this point in the season? Because it's not just the Banjo Bowl where I think there were signs of slippage, and nobody's going to play a perfect football game, but it was just trending that way, and it should have been more predictable in hindsight than it was. Greg, save this podcast. You're a podcast pro.
Rob and I are going to start going at it here.
If I
back in Winnipeg, I'm going to have to leave Regina.
I feel like I need a stripe. I should wear my
Jets fan.
striped shirt. I should have worn my striped shirt, not my sprinkle shirt. But if anything, the Riders this season have been consistently inconsistent. Like, no, you can't describe what they are. Some days they're a running team. Sometimes they're a passing team. Sometimes you don't even see William Powell in the game plan at all. Sometimes the defense looks like world beaters and ball hawks, and other times they look passive and lazy. It's hard to tell what this team is trying to be when they refuse to show us what they are.
Well, sorry.
Go ahead.
William Powell, I think the Riders realized after that first series they weren't going to run the ball against the Blue Bombers. William Powell was a non-factor. I think the fact is that go back to Winnipeg's defense being that good against William Powell. He was just, what were they going to do? By the time it was like, they seemed to be down 14-0 so quickly that you're not going to come back pounding the ball into William Powell. I don't think. That's my...
But then you go one-dimensional and you're playing into their hands. You still got the whole football game or 2.5 quarters.
But you were like me, though. You guys, like, after that first series, did you start looking for something else on TV? I started looking around, looking at the Rum Hut, seeing... It just seemed to be set the tone. Boom, one series.
Oh, exactly.
Oh, after that first series, I went up and got 2 tall cans and started wandering around the concourse. But it was a long game. But...
Did you have a Wally burger?
The Walby. I threatened to do that if we sold out the bus. We sold the bus, but luckily I didn't force myself to try to choke one of those down.
It was almost as gross looking. I posted a picture of that on Twitter, and it is
massive.
It's massive. I don't know how. And the guy said, the guy's wife was saying, "You let him buy that?" He said, well, "Look how scrawny he is." So he won't be scrawny after consuming that thing. 6 pounds of meat or whatever.
But the worst thing about IG Field, though, those concourses are so narrow you can't get through them. They are like luckily we were like basically below the Rum Hut, so we were at the wide part of the field, so up and down wasn't that hard to do. But I can't imagine wandering around that stadium too much.
You can't do it.
You can't. It's you're shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, and the complaints are you can't go to the bathroom. Yeah, because there's lineups that are huge, and women go there, and women's take longer than men, nature. And most of them miss the half of the third quarter because they're waiting to get in line. This
is a new stadium?
Yeah, and this is, and that's the thing is, and I made that point many times, at least Mosaic's team, they got it right, is they made the concourses big and wide so you can walk around because it's not sitting at a game anymore.
No.
It's the Rum Hut. It's the Pill Country. It's all that stuff. And the Riders, back when they built Mosaic Stadium, understood that. So they showed some foresight that build these big concourses, many washrooms. But mind you, Winnipeg does have a lot of washrooms. And it's hard to find them.
And the way Winnipeg try to get around, and part of the reason why their concourse is so narrow is their entire concourse is open. You can walk around that entire stadium and see the field if you could walk around that stadium.
You can't.
In order to do that, though, they made them narrower so their seats in the second tier weren't so far away from the field. So that's where you're stuck with. You either go with the narrow concourses and complete open, or you do what the Riders did, wide concourses, but you close them in.
Yeah. But that Rum Hut, they have so many great places to gather at that stadium. The Rum Hut and all these. Well, why just make them bigger? And you had to look at the end zone with the Rum Hut. It was like you're jammed in there. There's less. It's not even standing room only. It's just kind of wedged room only. It's kind of a sort of a bit of some lack of foresight on their behalf. But we heard a lot of things. It's still, and it's. I know people in Regina. I think it's noisier than Mosaic Stadium.
That's an architectural
mirage,
so to speak. That roof is designed to pump everything down. That cloth roof the Mosaic Stadium has, unfortunately, all it does is dampen sound.
Yeah, but it's
loud. It is super loud.
And they were having a blast.
Yeah.
They're having a blast. I know we're having a blast walking into that stadium. They did a lot of Rider stuff. The Riders were well represented. They had that Rider room, and the Blue Bombers stands are there. And one by somebody mentioned to me, says it's different than it used to be. And I said, there used to be some animosity. There'd be drunks and there'd be lots of not friendly banter, more ugly back and forth. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, because they're all older. It's not a hugely younger, other than the Rum Hut.
But that being said, one thing the Bombers do really well is before the game, you can actually tailgate, like NFL style tailgate outside their stadium. And our bus showed up about 2 hours before the game, and so we wandered the parking lot. You had people with their grills and everything out. You had people doing pizza parties, dance, there's a DJ at one party, and just wander around. And everyone's like the occasional boo and whatever, and then it's like, hey, come over, have a drink. The Bombers and Riders rivalry is a rivalry, but the fans are in on the joke, I guess, and they just have fun. It's a football game, and it goes through all ages now. It's not about older fans anymore.
I rarely see that Banjo Bowl trophy, and Willie Jefferson was carrying it out after the game.
He finally got to hold it because he's been complaining for 2 years.
Well, the Riders don't have anything to do with it.
They hate it.
They're not touching. It's not Banjo Bowl. There's nothing going on. They view it as a slap against the Riders, and you can view it in a narrow viewpoint if you want to look.
Why don't they accept it 1 year and then just demolish it?
Pretty well.
Smash it like a guitar.
Be like one of those.
banjo.
One of those.
A banjo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix used to set his guitar on fire, didn't he?
There you go.
When he was playing it and after he was playing it.
So the Who used to smash a few guitars in their time.
So why not accept the trophy and then turn it into?
Well, you got to win it.
Yeah.
Well, they've won it 7 times.
I know.
So why not demolish the trophy upon winning it the next time?
Exactly.
So what do you think, looking ahead for Cody Fajardo? Is we back to this testing Cody Fajardo?
There's no reason to question Cody Fajardo as a starting quarterback. I look at because he's pre-shown what he can do. What concerns me is I look around that offense, and I'm not sure that he A, has the weapons, or B, they're deploying them correctly. You talked about William Powell. You go back to the preseason when Craig Dickinson was asked about the identity that he wants this offense to have, and so much of that revolved around William Powell, and it revolved around play action. Well, William Powell, if you subtract the last 3 minutes of the Labor Day Classic, he's at 8 carries in 2 games until the final 3 minutes of the game. So if William Powell isn't the foundation of your offense among your playmakers, I think that whole design starts to unravel. If you look at the receiving core, Justin McKinnon is in his first year. Kyran Moore peaked very early in the season. Naaman Roosevelt is coming on, but he's no longer the type of player. He's very effective, but he's not going to stretch a defense anymore. Shaq Evans is a tremendous player. Manny Arsenault has shown some flashes of being the Manny Arsenault that people remember, but I don't think he's going to blow up a defense anymore. In the case of William Powell, I'm not sure they're using that asset correctly. In terms of the receiving core, I'm not sure that they have enough assets to really scare a defense.
I think you bring Kenny Stafford in.
And
I think it's for Manny. I think that's the only one you can do, because McGinnis has to play because you got to have a Canadian out there. And I think you throw McGinnis out at that wide spot and you bring Manny.
Unless you bring Corey Watson more than they thought.
Yes. So you either throw Dustin McGinnis out to the wide spot or bring Manny Arsenault closer to the quarterback, or you start Kenny Stafford. And Kenny Stafford has had superior numbers than Manny Arsenault this year. So let's see what Kenny Stafford do.
Greg, so you said during the Piffles podcast last week, and the discussion was centered around if and when Jordan Williams-Lambert comes back, who sits. And I think the consensus, and correct me if I'm wrong, on the Piffles podcast was that Kyran Moore should sit.
It was either Kyran or we talked about possibly Manny, yeah.
And Kyran Moore didn't really have a big game this past weekend. I mean, nobody did on offense. I still think you leave him in there because I think with his speed, quickness, there's some dynamism there that you can and should take advantage of. To me, I think it's Manny if you got to sit somebody. And it was fine to keep playing Manny if they keep winning. And he's coming off a 5-catch game, so maybe this isn't the best time to advance this notion. But I think you got to put some more electricity in that passing attack, and I think Kenny Stafford can do that.
Do you remember any Manny's catches though? Like they're not.
Well, he had that one catch late in the game that he caught 3 years downfield and went for 30.
Yeah.
Which fattened the numbers a bit, but the Manny's big catch of the year was on 2nd and 3 for the first down of the drive in the Labor Day of the game-winning drive in the Labor Day Classic. Nice catch, but I think you need more from that spot.
Are we really seeing the absence of Labatt, Cofield, and Blake now on that offensive line? Or once again, do we go back to what I brought up? That's a heck of a Winnipeg defense, and they probably chew up any offensive line.
Yes, both. But to go back, kind of rewind where you were talking about.
We don't do things in order.
I know. I'm sorry. But talking about strategy, and they need to bring Powell back in to get that play action going. They're supposed to be a play action team, but they're a play action team that refuses to run the ball.
Yeah.
So
you can't do that.
So with that, you got Fajardo constantly rolling out, and every team has that in their playbook now. Before the Banjo Bowl, they had their, I think it was CJOB guys, basically talking about the 3 keys to victory that the Bombers need to do. Number 1 was get on Cody on his rollout.
Yeah.
And
he's been greeted upon doing the pivot with more frequency.
So that move is effective if you've got them actually spying the running back or trying to take the running back out of play. But if you don't bring the running back in, if they have no fear of the Riders actually pounding the ball, they're going to jump on that every time. Like, they need to go back to play action. They need to go back to those option plays that were helping Cody when he first started picking up steam as the starting quarterback of the Riders. But for some reason, they've decided they don't want to do that anymore, and I don't get it.
And Murray, you mentioned the offensive line. I think that's a very valid point. If you look at the last 2 games, the Riders have allowed 10 sacks. They've allowed 22 sacks this season. 15 of them have come in 3 games. They've allowed 5 sacks against Calgary, and then 5 in each of the last 2 games. They've allowed 5 over the last 2 games. Over the 5 games preceding that, they allowed only 3. So they went from being this airtight team as far as protecting the quarterback to he's running for his life.
But
and
really
Labatt's gone,
Cofield's
gone, and Philip Blake is gone. Is that catching up with them?
I don't think Labatt is going to be back anytime soon either. I think this has gone on. I like to think it, but Dakota Shepley's still good. I just think it's just one of these things that Winnipeg has. Drake Navis, who's underrated and so good as that defensive tackle. He's defensive tackle, yeah. That it's more of this. How good Winnipeg. I keep hammering at that, and I know I'm not. It's their good defense. They're fun to watch. Adam Big Hill's playing very well. Their secondary covers like crazy.
But when you got
the leading receiving interception guy in Winston Rose.
But when you got 2 guys in Big Hill and Willie Jefferson that are forces of nature on their own, like independently of each other, they would be leading a defense if they weren't together. You put them together, they cause havoc. Willie Jefferson is pound per pound the best athlete in the CFL, yep. And no one can touch him. Like, he is playing.
He's doing backflips.
That was crazy.
He is playing with a chip on his shoulder after whatever happened here or whatever happened with Toronto. I don't know, but he is playing for his next contract, and he is going to make everyone pay. And the way he tweets about it, he knows what he's doing, and he's trying to make a point. And the Riders were his exclamation point.
I think it started with that Eskimos game too.
Mm-hmm.
Where he just
that's
dominated.
as good a defensive game as anybody, I would argue, has ever had.
And even
that was scary.
Even on Saturday when he had that forced fumble and strip sack, and they got the ball, that was just he came from the.
Nobody touched him.
He came from defensive tackle. That's where he came from. So that shows you how they use him. And there was one play, I noticed he was way back by the safety, so they're dropping him back in pass coverage. Same thing Chris Jones did with him. You take advantage of an athlete like that, and you get what you get out of it. And the Riders unfortunately put their money on Micah Johnson, who's had a game. I don't know how you describe that game. The missed tackles, but
he had his first sack.
He had his first
and
sack.
Arguably his second. That's a coin flip between Micah Johnson and Charleston Hughes.
Yeah, and he should have had more
But there were missed tackles, and there was that penalty, that roughing the passer penalty. 10 years ago, that wasn't a penalty. I'm not sure 5 years ago that was a penalty. I guess you call that according to the letter of the law, but that wasn't going to injure anybody.
No, and that's always the fine line when it comes to calls like that. When it comes to safety of the quarterback, where is the fine line between that should be a penalty and that's tic tac, like let's move. This is football, and unfortunately, if you're going to call it, you got to call it, and they called it.
I think you got to take those kind of judgment calls out of the officials' hands almost, and that's a call. That's a penalty, regardless of what you official can think. That's a penalty, and that's the way it is right now. That's the way we play football, and we see it on Sunday in the NFL. Some ticky-tack calls, and that's pretty well. They know better.
But I'm not gonna dump over Micah Johnson for that.
He didn't need to hit him either, though. I don't know how you pull. It was
such an incidental.
Yeah,
thing.
And
it wasn't malicious.
That was a big play. And I think it was
that extent that
drive.
He threw the ball away, and that was a second down play.
Yeah,
and suddenly you've got another life. And he missed a tackle on Chris Strevler on a run that allowed them to keep moving the football. So that wasn't a good drive for Micah Johnson. But I wonder if you're seeing some signs that he's becoming what they want him to become.
I looked up last year. I think he had 6 sacks by week 12. And he finished with 14, so he went on to get 8 sacks in the second. And I remember in the final third of the season, no one could stop him. He was literally the best player on the field, and getting 14 sacks of defensive tackle. I still think that's part of his game. And I watched that game. You watched that too. he didn't seem to be getting double teamed as much as I thought. He just seemed to be getting blocked.
Yeah, same with Charleston Hughes.
Charleston Hughes, yeah. Is he tiring out? I don't know.
Every time you say that, he goes and has 2 sacks.
I know.
But
He's not exactly against drawing attention to himself on Twitter and saying, and I think, unfortunately, after that game, we know who the number one lineman.
Yeah, that wasn't a well-timed tweet. And we've all had those tweets that don't age especially well.
No. So what do you think? Does Montreal here coming on a Saturday? Just quickly back to, what do you think of the Friday, Saturday games? What do you think of the triple headers?
Just stay away from Sunday and I'm fine.
Yeah.
Let us watch the NFL on Sunday.
And that's exactly why they did it. They got to stay away from NFL football, and that's why they're off Thursday nights too. So
I liked Randy's interview with Rod Peterson that he said, we want to own Fridays and Saturdays. We want people to know that's destination. Because remember you say, on any given Monday, Tuesday, usually Wednesday, because you never knew when the games are on. They said, we want to own Friday and Saturdays, and we'll put them off on Sunday. Remember, was it 2008 they played the playoffs on a Saturday, Rob?
Yeah, that was they used to play Grey Cup on Saturday.
Yeah.
Riders won their first Grey Cup on a Saturday.
Okay, do you think they should maybe look at their playoffs of that schedule, or are they going to go?
I would like to see it, but they still get good numbers for their television-wise for their games, their playoff games on the Sunday. There's got to be some reasoning why they spun out of that pretty quickly, but I think the CFL has a concern when you schedule a day, and I watched all of it on Saturday, where you've got 3 games, and they're all bad, and so it's appointment TV, and you want to sit there watching it at CFL for football for 9 hours, but
they can't.
By midway through the CFL triple header, they're talking about will Army defeat Michigan? That becomes the intriguing football event of the day, and of course there was tennis.
So they need double.
But the Riders the CFL had 3 games back to back to back, and they were so awful.
Yeah.
There was no reason why they couldn't do a doubleheader Friday on Saturday. I love football. I can watch football all day. But even like when you look at the lineup, it's like this is going to be a long slog of a day, and it was. So I guess though they were trying to get all the games out of the way before the NFL season started. So,
but it's scary when you got 3 games. A league that prides itself on an entertaining product, and then you have a whole day set aside where you can just watch CFL.
They can't control that.
But here's the thing.
It just wasn't very good, and it generally isn't very good anymore.
But also, if you look at the schedule, last week they only had 3 games.
Yeah.
So why was?
But when you're going to give 3 bye weeks, they're going to have.
Well,
3
no,
game
no,
weeks.
no. But I get that those. But why
does one of them have to be Labor Day weekend?
But why was Labor Day weekend a 3-team bye week when you could have had your extra game that day and done 3 games this week?
Football season starts after Labor Day.
Sure. Okay.
Tell that to the Lions.
Tell that to the Lions, exactly. But I think with Montreal coming in here, Montreal's running 3 games. They got Vernon Adams. The Riders beat him
back for this game.
in that truncated game. That they beat him without Adams. They beat him without Steinbach. And I'm not
Steinbach is in Manitoba.
Exactly. Well, I was just kind of there. So I think it's a different Alouettes team coming in here than the one they beat in the rain-shortened games and whatever happened there. And I think it's going to be another test, and surprisingly, but if the offensive line gets its act together, if they learn how to tackle, and I don't know how you teach tackling to guys who are pros. I sit and watch practice, and they work on tackling. They tackle dummies. They tackle that donut thing. The guys talked about it. Sean Adua talked about how, you got to do it as a player.
Who?
Sean Adowu, yes.
Like, who is that guy?
He's the backup linebacker.
Oh, I was like, who are you talking about?
Oh, that's funny. But
sorry.
They have to tackle better, so they got to work on that. So it's going to present some challenges because I don't think the weather's going to be great this week for doing a whole lot of things in practice.
Saturday's supposed to be nice.
But rain all the way up till Saturday, yeah.
So they got to. So basically, if we're going to say things for the Riders to beat the Alouettes, you have to better on the offensive line, better running game, better passing game, better tackling, better defense.
Better.
So
simple. It's
maybe better food and better beer and better. So they better be better or they're going to be bitter. How's that for a quick one?
What are you expecting, Greg?
I don't know. Like I said,
I don't know either.
That's the worst part. Like the minute I think I know what this team is going to do, they do something I completely don't expect, and who knows what that's going to be this week. But I want to say the Riders are going to win, but with Vernon Adams, he's been playing really well this year, and that team is living and dying by Kahari Jones, which is great to see because I love Kahari as a player and as a ambassador for this league. So I think the Riders are going to win, but I think it's going to be a lot tighter than everyone's going to expect.
I would agree, but I really don't. I don't really have a handle on this team right now. Maybe that's my own fault, but it will be the 2/3 mark of the season on Saturday, and I'm still just not sure what I thought I had a pretty good idea, but maybe I'm attaching too much importance to one game. But that to me just took some cracks that were starting to show and turned them into not caverns, but there's more areas for concern than maybe I thought.
Maybe they'll be inspired with a bye week ahead of them too. They've it's been a great schedule in terms of bye weeks. 4 games, and then they're going to have 5 games to end the season, and then
it gets. They've got to win this one to keep giving themselves some cushion too, because not cushion isn't the right word, but you got to win when you can. You got to win at home, because you look down the stretch and that's a murderous schedule.
3 weeks in a row on the road, so
and 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I was doing planning my schedule, looking at that, going, oh, I'm going to be tired too. I hope Rob's nice to me, gives me a couple of days off in there.
And they've got two Edmonton, Calgary, and a Winnipeg in there. Like it's not going to be a fun schedule.
That's great scheduling. Let's give the CFL. I love how they've gone to having the rivalries at the end of the season. Let's get drop all the Eastern games in the summer when it's kind of fun to go to the ballpark, but when it's become real football, it's like everyone at Mosaic Stadium is always in their seat for the fourth quarter, because that's when they know if the football game's there, regardless what happens. Good scheduling on the CFL to have the rivalries set up in the big games down the stretch.
But those concentration of road games, that could be.
So they must have known this Heritage Classic was coming.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. That's planned 2 years in advance.
And even, why is, I guess, the scheduling, but why would they have to play the Rider game the same day as the Heritage Classic? Like, why couldn't they found a way to...
Well, the NHL doesn't care.
Yeah, they don't. The NHL's a Goliath.
But still, I would have...
And you can still watch both.
Yeah.
One starts at 5, one starts at 8.
What are you going to pick as a Jets fan?
What's that?
What are you going to pick?
I am going to... I don't know how I'm going to handle that day yet. What I would like to do, and I can't, is just say, I'm going to buy a ticket, sit in the stands, be a Jets fan at Mosaic Stadium, and then just enjoy it. But the imperatives of actually writing about a Rider game that should be ending as the Heritage Classic is starting, and then having to write about the Heritage Classic, I haven't figured out October 26th yet. I have not figured out September 10th yet.
Well, you got some time.
Yeah, got a bit of time.
I don't know. Oh, we have a question. I almost...
yes. Good for you.
I'm sorry. We have a question. We have our annual question, and I forgot to mention it. This is from Warren Henning, a very nice person. And he said, Rob, I just wanted to say that I really enjoy your podcast and make a point of listening to it each week. Hopefully this one hasn't changed it. I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I'm looking to replace my Durant jersey with possibly a Fajardo jersey, but with the 1-year contracts that keep getting signed by the players, I feel that if I were to get Cody's jersey, he won't be a Rider long enough to even make it worthwhile. Thoughts?
Probably.
If they sign him, they gotta give him more than 1 year.
Yeah.
Like if you are going to invest a guy as your starting quarterback, and he's this young, you lock him up as long as you can, because there's no reason not to. Like he's not going to get Bo Levi Mitchell money. He's not going to get Mike Riley money. He's probably going to be in that 4 tier, 4 or 5 maybe, depending on how many years they give him. He shouldn't go anywhere long, and they shouldn't let him go anywhere anyway. But
I don't think they're going to have a lot of. I think it's going to be his. It's going to be his decision.
Oh, it's going to be his decision.
His agent didn't say much when I talked to him last week, but I think it's going to be Cody's decision. I agree. They should try to lock him up, but at the same token, 27 years old. There's a league down south that needs quarterbacks all the time.
This market can give him what nobody else can. Sponsor. This is what this market can give Cody Fajardo that nobody else can. There's no money in this for Cody Fajardo. It's an absolute grand gesture on his part, lending his name to this wonderful initiative. But if you look at sponsorships, you look at advertising, you look at off-field things, you look at anything, this market is unmatched. If Cody Fajardo within the CFL wants to max out,
at the end of the day, if everyone's professional football goal is to make the NFL. Everyone's. If he thinks going to the XFL to be the starting quarterback of the LA Wildcats is going to make him a bigger star, I don't see it. I think up here he'll get the money. You don't have to. The league's not going anywhere. He's going to get paid because he's a quarterback, and he's going to be in a hotbed of Canadian football. So
with some continuity, this is a place where he's shown he's popular and can produce. Rider transactions we have.
Oh, let me guess.
Chad Jeter.
Chad Jeter is back.
That must say AC Leonard's shoulder is far worse than we thought.
Gone from the practice roster are Gabriel Ferraro, kicker, and Solomon Means.
Yes.
Oh, he was still around?
So Means to an end. Solomon Means has been.
So
released.
Jeter's must mean that AC Leonard's shoulder is far worse than we think. Because I think that's what he hurt. I could tell, but I think that's what he hurt.
And it wasn't hard to tell that Jeter was in town yesterday when he tweeted, "It's colder here than I remember." So I'm like, oh, he's obviously in Regina.
Yeah. That's a good
it's only
spell.
September.
It's not Jordan, not JWL, but it's, Jeter had some pretty good. I think he had some.
That was a
pretty good
surprising cut. So
yes. So
And
you want me
Murray,
to go
please,
this? All right.
This is our sign off.
Okay.
thing.
If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review and a 5-star rating. It helps us grow the podcast. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to send us a question, you can email Rob at RobVanstone and we'll read it on the show. You can follow Rob on Twitter at Rob Vanstone, or myself at MurrayLP, or Greg at
Greg on Sports.
And I want to say a shout out to a couple of fans came up to me in the airport on Sunday morning and said they listen and watch our podcast all the time.
Oh.
And they really enjoy it, and they told me their names, and I forgot them. So anyway, I do remember you saying hi, and thank you for listening and watching our podcast.
Please email me at rvanstone@postmedia.com. We'll give you some love on the next podcast, number 68. Laurie Skolrud. Greg, anything you'd like to say before we let your day improve by allowing you to flee this?
Go get some lunch.
You do, yes.
Be sure to check out. We're recording Piffle's podcast tomorrow night. It'll be up on Thursday morning probably. Talk to LJ McCrae. So we got him in the can, and follow us at pifflespodcast.com.
Perfect. Murph, thanks so much. Greg, thanks so much. I'm Rob. We'll do this again next week. Thanks for being with us, and take care.